everyone, Calvin here. Welcome back to Everyday Backpacker. Today we're going to start part 3 of our video series on trip planning. Now, most of the things I've seen on trip planning have all been pretty similar. They do a really good job of covering things like taking care of your gear, like cleaning everything or back flushing your filter, or soaking your bear bag because it smells like refight death from the last trip, or in this case from last season. But one thing that doesn't really get talked about a whole lot with planning is what really is a surprisingly important part of it. And that is group dynamics. Now, of course, this isn't going to apply to somebody who's a solo backpacker. And there are people out there who like to go out and enjoy a solitude by themselves, by choice. There's also people who go solo backpacking by accident. Hey dude, I'm not going to be able to go on that backpacking trip. My wife wants me to clean out the gutters.
Seriously, dude? I pick you up in like 10 minutes.
Yep, sadly, we've all been there from time to time. But, like most people, I tend to prefer going out in a group setting. It's just fun to be around my friends and get away from everything and have a little bit of opportunity to talk and just enjoy the experience. Now, if you go out with people that you've been hiking with before, you generally speaking have a good understanding of what they expect, and when they, in turn, have a good idea of what you expect from a trip. But if you are going out with a new group of people, sometimes, almost inevitably, certain conflicts can arise. This is especially true of backpacking because oftentimes we're put into situations where we're pushed beyond our comfort zone. And when people are pushed beyond their comfort zone, their stress levels tend to peak and they tend to lash out. And sometimes just something as simple as a misunderstanding can throw a whole trip right into the dumpster. Fortunately, there are some things that you can do both before a trip and during a trip that can help to mitigate some of these unfortunate circumstances. And they're oftentimes easier and more enjoyable than washing your pots. Now, as I said, I love going out on solo trips every once in a while. They're great fun. But I usually go out there expecting to have some sort of great existential self-realizing moment, and generally speaking, I just end up walking around by myself trying to get the lyrics of My Sharona out of my head. So more often than not, I tend to go out with at least one other hiking buddy, sometimes in small groups. And because of this, I have kind of created a fairly decent way of kind of getting onto the same page before we head out to the backcountry. What I typically will do is invite people over for something quite as simple as some beer and maps. The idea being, of course, to kind of talk about things, kind of plan out camping spots and locations and things like that, which, if we're being honest, generally speaking, get tossed out the window the moment we hit the trail. The real reason for meeting up is to get to know each other and to start getting on the same page. Because one of the things that I think we don't really think about a whole lot with backpacking trips is what kind of goals we have for that trip. And you're probably thinking, goals for a backpacking trip? Isn't it just walk a long distance, stop, make camp, eat dinner, sleep, repeat? Generally speaking, yes. But different people have different expectations of the trip when they go out. For instance, some people like to go nice and slow, enjoy their time, take lots of pictures, make YouTube videos, and generally just meander through the woods. And if they come across a great camping spot, they're going to stop and they're going to enjoy it. Other people are more miles oriented. They want to go, they want to make it to a certain destination, or they want to go ahead and do a peak bag, or something like that. And generally speaking, want to move. The problem arises when these two people who have these two different ideas of the goals of the trip don't talk about it ahead of time, and that can create some friction down the road. And so in addition to kind of deciding what your overall goal is with the trip, mileage and such, it's also a really good opportunity to get to know that person and learn a little bit about what kind of physical conditioning they do, Learn about any kind of possible medical concerns that they may have, things that you might need to know in an emergency situation. And then also to kind of gauge what kind of experience they have. If you're taking a person out who is a new backpacker, there's probably going to be some things that you're going to have to do a little bit differently. Lower mileage, better camping site selection, things like that. Because if you push them way too far outside of their comfort zones, one, they may never backpack with you again, and two, they may never go out and backpack ever again. And that would be kind of defeating the purpose of bringing new people along on trips. So you're going to want to make sure that you're tailoring the trip to everyone's general enjoyment and conditioning. And then also learn about some of their preferences when they're out hiking. Do they prefer to hike in a group, or do you need to stay in a group for safety concerns, i.e. bears? Or are they okay with you hiking ahead a little ways and just deciding to meet up at a certain spot during the day? Both are generally acceptable practices, but knowing ahead of time is going to create a lot less friction and stress while on that trip. And it's also important to stress open communication, both before and during a trip. Because the problem that I think we run into, and I have certainly run into, is when we don't know ahead of time certain people's concerns, pet peeves, and things like that can create general friction. A really great example of this is I was on a trip with a person who will remain nameless to save face for anybody, except for myself, because I'm going to totally throw myself under the bus. We were on a trip and we were going up on a ridgeline, and there was some weather coming in. Now, I wasn't particularly stressed about the weather. I had been at the spot before. I dealt with this kind of weather before. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it just wasn't stressing me out. So I was taking my general time getting up there, still moving quickly, but going up there. Unbeknownst to me, the guy who I was hiking with, who was a coworker, who I thought I had generally known before, but we had skipped this part of the thing because, again, we worked together. What that didn't allow me to learn was that he had had several experiences with lightning. It caused him a lot of high stress given the situation we were in. And he kept trying to push me along. And instead of trying to understand why he was doing that, this is all on my shoulders, I got frustrated. And I basically told him, well, just go ahead and go, and I'll catch up to you. That was the wrong thing to do in hindsight. If I had known that situation, I would have been a little bit better understanding and a little bit more patient with the fact that he was experiencing some fairly legitimate concerns, which we found out later when, after eating lunch up there, a large bolt of lightning hit not too close to us, but enough to make us go, all right, let's get down. Hindsight being 2020, it would have been a good idea to have kind of had that understanding of experiences. And I found that these tips and practices are especially useful in longer trips. So this summer, we have a week-long trip that at least 3 of us are going on, possibly 4. And so it was important for us to kind of start getting onto that same page. And so recently we met at one of the members' house. He made an awesome dinner, and we geeked out over maps, but we also told stories and kind of got to know each other a little bit better. It's not a bad idea to do those ahead of time. Even if you have an opportunity to go on several hikes before you go out on the big hike to kind of get comfortable with each other's mannerisms, that can be very helpful too. Is there anything wrong with just meeting up at the trailhead and going? Absolutely not. Oftentimes it does work out really well, but it also can lead to some of these frictions that can build up. So it's also important to have some defense mechanisms and things built in to your own psyche to be able to deal with troubles as they arrive on the trip. Because invariably, people are going to get uncomfortable, they're going to get wet, the weather's going to suck, they're going to be hot and tired, and eventually, sometimes, proper decorum breaks down and we end up kind of lashing out at each other. A really good example of that was a trip that I went on recently that had some pretty bad weather conditions and caused us to have to pick up and head back down. And so we were forced to find a campsite after dark, set everything up. It was cold, it was windy, we were wet, we were miserable, we were unhappy because our trip had been cut short. We just wanted to get a fire going and try to warm up. And one of the guys in the group decided to go ahead and make a fire. and it just wasn't working out for him. And you could tell, generally speaking, he was getting way more and more frustrated as he progressed. And eventually, nothing against him at all, he had a little bit of an angry moment. Now, of course, we could have said, "Hey, man, you need to chill out. Like, it's no big deal." Da, 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 da. But in that situation, it probably wouldn't have gone over well. Fortunately, the other guys in the group, we were all kind of understanding because everybody was miserable. So instead of that, it was like, "Hey, let us take over for you. Let's see if we can do something here. I know you're upset." We were trying to be supportive. So how you handle a situation can oftentimes diffuse that situation. We were eventually able to get the fire going, and all was well. A little bit of whiskey didn't hurt either. So it's important for you to give people a little bit of leeway that you normally may not in a backcountry situation, because there's going to be opportunities where people are just going to be pushed to their limits, and that's okay. It's not always easy, and it can be forgiven if you don't. The other part of that, though, is yourself and controlling your own emotion. Realizing that you're starting to head down a bad path, and maybe take a few moments just to go off and pump some water or drink some water, or just generally separate yourself from the situation and chill out. Because it's a lot easier to do that than to say something stupid and then regret it later on. So it's important while we're on trail to kind of understand that, we're all there, we've all been through it, and kind of help out instead of just get pissy and call people out on it, especially new people, because they're not going to have a lot of those skills to deal with. But again, at the end of the day, there is going to be tension, there is going to be storming. It just kind of happens. I still do it myself, and I'm not proud of it, and there are things that I have to work on every day and every trip I go on. But a little bit of preemptive planning and getting everybody on the same page, and understanding how they feel about certain things is going to go a long way to mitigating those arguments before they ever start. What are some techniques that you've learned to deal with people on the trail when things aren't going great, or if they're stressed out or angry, or when you're stressed out and angry? Let me know in the comments below. If you have a story about a situation that some people could learn from, maybe even leave that down in the comments. I hope you found this video to be useful, and I hope it gives you a little bit of a perspective into something that normally doesn't get talked about. And as always, keep hiking on.